So most people think that retirement happens like way out there in 60s or even later. But there's a movement of people who are retiring in their 30s and 40s, quitting their jobs and living the lives that they've always wanted to live. I'm going to tell you guys how. Hey guys, Jessica here. So before jumping into it, really quick call out that we're Uprise. We're a fintech company that puts together personalized Wall Street level financial plans completely free. And this is a lot of what we do. We help people think about, hey, what does the future look like? Do you want to retire early? Or on the flip side, do you want to buy a yacht? Like, people have very, very different ideas for what the future looks like. And we help people figure out a personalized path in terms of getting there. So if you want to get your free financial plan, definitely check us out. I've linked to us in the description below. Also, please give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. It really helps small channels like ours. So getting back to it, in this video, I'm going to be talking about the FIRE movement. This is not that documentary on Netflix. It is actually, FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And it's basically a movement, a community of people who are focused on reclaiming their time, like living for themselves. And they do this by building wealth, spending less, and retiring super early. And the coolest thing here is that, I used to think that retiring early or becoming financially independent meant that you had to be really rich, that somehow, it's out of reach for normal people. Maybe you inherited a lot of money or you hit the lottery or something along those lines, but it's actually not true. Anybody can work towards this goal. Anybody can, make this happen. It's all about the choices that you make in life. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about what the FIRE movement is, how they do it, pros and cons, and try to help you figure out if maybe, this is something that you want to do as well. And stick around to the end. I'm going to be sharing my numbers, how far I am from firing. So starting off, what is FIRE? FIRE basically means that you want to get to financial independence as quickly as possible. And financial independence means that you've reached a point where you have enough in savings and investments to be able to sustain yourself for like the rest of your life. Put another way, you have enough in savings and investments to support your lifestyle. So let me unpack that a little bit more. So say you had $1,000 and you invested that $1,000 into the market, and the market returns 6% a year, meaning you're making $60 a year off of that $1,000 that you put into the market. Obviously, you can't live off of $60 a year, but what if you had $1 million or $2 million? That gets really interesting, right? 6% off of $2 million is $120,000 a year. Could you live off of $120,000 a year? So let me go a little bit deeper. There's this idea called the 4% rule. And it was basically an idea that was pioneered by a financial advisor, William Bengen, and then followed up with an academic paper by Trinity University. And the rule basically says that if you spend less than 4% of the total value of your savings and investments, if you spend less than 4% a year, then you could basically live that way for the rest of your life. So 4% is a really specific number. Where does it come from? 4% is founded off of the idea that the market historically has returned somewhere between 5 to 8% a year, adjusted for inflation. And so if you spend 4%, which is less than that, then in theory, you should be fine. With that in mind, we can work backwards then, right? You already know how much you're spending on a monthly basis, on an annual basis. So if you took your annual number and then you multiply that by 25, that's how much you need to have saved up. That's how much you need in savings and investments to be financially independent. And let's take an example. So say you spend $50,000 a year, multiply $50,000 times 25, that's $1.25 million. Basically, $50,000 is 4% of 1.25 million. So that's pretty simple, right? Like, your financial independence number is your annual spend times 25. That said, I want to caveat this. There are some criticisms of it, and I'm going to cover more about that later in this video. Before talking about that, I want to actually talk about, how people get there. How do you get to $1.25 million? Because that's a lot of money. And there's no magic here, right? There's two key ways to do this. You could A, earn more money, or B, you could save more and spend less. And in terms of how fast you can get there, it really depends on you, right? There's a lot of, maybe a lot of the reputation of the FIRE movement where people have been really frugal, saving like 50%, 70%, 80% of their earnings every single year. And that's probably one of the biggest criticisms of the FIRE movement in general, which is like there's this impression that you have to be like super, super frugal in order to hit that number as soon as possible. I've heard of stories of like, hey, there's this couple that lived off of donuts. They owned a donut shop and they lived in the back and then only ate donuts and now they're multimillionaires. I've heard of this other story somebody told me recently where this person was working for Google, so making like a ton of money, but then they were like living in their car in the parking lot because, hey, Google has free food, free showers, this kind of stuff. And so that way they could reduce expenses and get to financial independence way, way earlier. That said, there are a lot of other people in this movement who take a more moderate approach and are able to either, hey, push out their date a little bit. So instead of firing in their 30s, maybe they do it in their 50s. Or on the flip side, maybe they're working a second job to try to bring in more income. At the end of the day, it has to make sense for you, for your specific situation. And then the other thing I want to call out is that just because somebody is super, super frugal doesn't mean they're unhappy. Maybe they're really, they really love this hobby of figuring out like how they can cut even more from their expenses. And hey, whatever works, right? The other thing I wanted to mention about FIRE is that it's pretty cool, the community that's built around it. There are a lot of people who, share tips on how they did it and help them figure out, okay, what you should invest in, stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, it's pretty daunting, right? To try to figure out how to get from wherever you are to like millions of dollars in net worth. And so, there's a lot of people sort of supporting each other. Hey, you can do it, this kind of stuff that I find really amazing. So if you're curious about checking out that community, I would recommend checking out Reddit. There are a bunch of subreddits there that are dedicated to financial independence. You can check out the FIRE subreddit, which is the main one. But there's also like Lean FIRE, which is for people who live a super frugal lifestyle and want to have are hitting a smaller number with a lower annual spend. Then there are the people on the other end of the spectrum, Fat FIRE, where they want to live a baller lifestyle in retirement and they're trying to hit a really giant number. So the question around 4% is that cutting it too close, right? And the fundamental thing behind this is that the future is unpredictable. It's always unpredictable, as with anything investing, right? And there are two potential issues. Like one is that you don't know what your spend might be like. You kind of have an idea, right? That this is how much I'm spending today, but you don't know if in the future, in 10 years from now, what your spend might look like. For example, if you live in a house and the basement accidentally floods and you need some repairs, that's a big lump sum that you're withdrawing from your savings and investments that might put the entire equation out of whack. And then the second thing is that it's based off of the assumption that the market or your investments are going to return somewhere between 5 to 8% on average a year. And there's no guarantee, everything in the future, there's no guarantee that would happen. Just because the market has returned for the last 100 years around 5 to 8% a year on average doesn't mean that the next 100 years are going to look the same. And in fact, there are a lot of financial experts, including, for example, the founder of Vanguard, who think that the next 100 years are going to return lower investment rates. On top of that, it doesn't take into account how you are managing your portfolio, right? Because everybody's specific investments is going to impact what kind of returns that they're getting. All of this to say, be careful, right? Be conservative with your estimates. So one of the things you could do is maybe instead of a 4% rule, you could try a 3% rule. So withdrawing less than 3% a year, hopefully that can sustain your lifestyle. Or on the flip side, or maybe in addition, when you're calculating your annual spend, maybe put some buffer in there so that you have some room for, unexpected things that happen. So the last piece of this, where I am, how far I am on the firing journey. As you can maybe guess, I'm a startup founder. My husband's also a startup founder. We're pretty far from firing. So we live in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have one kid. We're spending between $12,000 to $14,000 a month, which works out to be a little bit over $150,000 a year. Off of that number, that means that our financial independence number, is about $4 million. And if we're being conservative, probably closer to $5 million. And I think that's probably the same story as a lot of people who live in high cost of living places and or are working for startups, because the salary that you have is probably not as high as it could otherwise be. And so you're not saving as much on a month-to-month basis, but hopefully the stock options that you have are worth something in the future if the company goes public and stuff like that. And fingers crossed. And that's it. If you have any other questions about the FIRE movement or anything else, definitely let us know in the comments. And I also wanted to call out one thing is that, just because somebody retires early, so to speak, it doesn't mean that they necessarily stop working or stop doing stuff. A lot of people, go on to, volunteer or work part-time or start their own business. And so I think that's a really cool thing, which is that it's about regaining control of your time. And that's the most precious thing that we have in this life, right? Like, are we doing with our lives what we want to be doing? I think it's just really healthy to every once in a while take a step back and reevaluate. Like, are we spending our time the way we want to be spending our time? Also, if you'd like more support with personal finance, definitely check us out. We're Uprise. As I mentioned, we put together personalized Wall Street level financial plans completely and 100% for free. So if you have any questions about how to retire early, how to think about student loans, how to navigate employer benefits, we'd be happy to help. And on average, we put 100K in net worth back into people's pockets. Other than that, if you'd like to see more videos like this one, please give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and click the bell for notifications. See you guys next time.